long did you live in Japan?
Man, probably 18 years, something like that.
18 years. What age did you move there?
Went there when I was probably 16, 17, something like that.
And why did you go there when you were that young?
I wanted to learn the martial arts. I wanted to learn healing, herbology.
Some stories live in the shadows, whispered between dojo walls, passed down through grainy interviews, never confirmed, never denied.
It might sound too philosophical, but it's unacting acting or acting unacting. If
You've lost me.
I have, right?
One such tale claims that in 1970, a young Steven Seagal knocked on Bruce Lee's door and walked away bruised, humiliated, and silent. But is that even possible? The timelines barely match. The people involved are long gone. Yet the rumor remains. In this deep dive documentary, we pull apart every clue, dissecting statements, analyzing inconsistencies, and confronting the one question no one dares to answer. What if it's true? Here's Bruce Lee's real fight with Steven Seagal in 1970 that everyone missed. The rumor that won't die. It all started as a whisper, a murmur barely audible beneath the roar of martial arts legends and Hollywood lore. The rumor went that in 1970, a young Steven Seagal, a relatively unknown teenager from Fullerton, California, allegedly showed up uninvited at Bruce Lee's home in Culver City, demanding a fight. Not a respectful challenge, but a brazen, no-holds-barred test of skill between two generations of martial artists. At face value, it sounds improbable. There were no photographs, no video footage, no official documentation of such an event. Bruce Lee's life and legacy have been dissected endlessly by biographers, film historians, and martial arts experts, yet no mention was ever made of this mysterious encounter. For decades, the story drifted in the margins, a mythic what-if that fans debated quietly, mostly dismissing it as legend or Seagal's own later exaggeration. Then, in 2023, everything changed. A channel uploaded a video that reignited the rumor with fresh intensity. The video featured a man claiming to be a close friend of Seagal, someone who said he had been there the day it happened. His voice trembled slightly as he recounted the story, speaking with the intimacy of a confidant who had carried the secret for years. According to him, the visit was sudden and unannounced. Steven, then a confident but brash teenager, drove all the way from Fullerton to Culver City, intent on proving himself against the legend. The witness described Bruce's initial reaction, a mix of surprise, amusement, and perhaps irritation when the doorbell rang. What followed, the witness claimed, was a fight that was less a friendly spar and more a brutal lesson. Bruce Lee, renowned for his lightning-fast reflexes and strategic mind, allegedly fought Seagal with his hands behind his back, a move both symbolic and humiliating. Within minutes, the young challenger lay injured, his pride shattered, reportedly needing ambulance assistance. This sensational claim spread like wildfire. Clips of Seagal interviews were scoured for hints of truth or deception. Historians and fans cross-checked dates, locations, and biographical details. Was it possible the world had overlooked an epic clash between two titans? A secret skirmish that rewrote the narrative of martial arts history? The knock on Bruce Lee's door. The fight began on a seemingly ordinary afternoon in Culver City, California, circa 1970. Bruce Lee, at the peak of his physical prowess and charisma, was deeply engrossed in his training routine. Unlike the polished, choreographed fights seen in movies, his backyard sessions were raw and filled with the spirit of mastery. Surrounded by a tight-knit group of students and friends, people who revered him not just as a martial artist, but as a visionary, Bruce was demonstrating his signature Jeet Kune Do moves with a fluidity and speed that few could match. Suddenly, this quiet scene was interrupted by an unexpected knock at the front door. According to the witness, who later went viral on the internet, the visitor was none other than a young Steven Seagal, accompanied by the witness himself. Seagal, then a teenager or very young man, was reportedly eager to meet the legendary Bruce Lee. They knocked firmly, but the door remained shut. No answer. Bruce and his friends were too absorbed in their training to hear the visitors at first. Unwilling to be deterred, Seagal and his companions circled to the back of the house, where the training was taking place. The backyard was modest, typical of the Californian homes of that era, with a concrete slab and some sparse equipment, but it was sacred ground to Bruce and his disciples. There, the witness claims, they found Bruce Lee and his group deep in a sparring session. Seagal, standing tall and confident, introduced himself with a calm yet assertive demeanor. It was not just a casual hello. He purportedly challenged Bruce to a sparring match on the spot. The audacity of it stunned everyone present. The witness recalls Bruce's reaction as a mixture of surprise and bemusement. He laughed, not with scorn, but genuine disbelief. To him, this stranger's insistence seemed almost naive, perhaps even a bit disrespectful. After all, Bruce was known for his strict training philosophy and had little patience for showboating. But Seagal, undeterred, pressed on. He reportedly told Bruce he wouldn't leave without a fight. This moment, the witness says, was charged with tension. What happened next was nothing like a friendly sparring session or a polite exchange between martial artists. According to the lone eyewitness who claims to have been there, the atmosphere quickly shifted from curiosity to something far more serious. A raw, unforgiving confrontation that would leave a permanent mark on everyone present. Bruce Lee, surrounded by a close-knit circle of friends and training partners who had gathered in his modest backyard in Culver City, barely flinched at the unexpected challenge. There was no hesitation in his stance, no flicker of amusement or anger. Instead, there was a quiet, commanding presence, the kind of calm that precedes a storm. With measured steps, Bruce moved forward, closing the distance with a deliberate grace that spoke volumes. This was not an invitation to play. It was a lesson waiting to be delivered. Unlike the typical martial arts rituals of bows and handshakes, Bruce's acceptance was marked by a profound silence. His hands remained folded behind his back, an almost casual posture that belied the lethal precision soon to be unleashed. Seagal, confident in the power and control honed through his early Aikido training, took a stance of readiness. His frame loomed large, every muscle tense and coiled like a spring. Yet, he was stepping into a very different kind of fight, one that did not respond to force with force, but to timing and technique with devastating efficiency. The fight erupted without warning. It was quick, brutal, and surgical. For no more than 2 intense minutes, the yard became a blur of movement and sound. The eyewitness recalls the almost hypnotic rhythm of Bruce's kicks, sharp, snapping like a whip cracking through the air. He moved with a fluidity that seemed effortless, each strike delivered from unexpected angles that broke the natural flow of Seagal's balance. Remarkably, Bruce never resorted to using his hands. Instead, his legs became instruments of precision, cutting through space with lightning speed. Sidekicks snapped out, targeting Seagal's legs, hips, and torso, while his footwork shifted with deceptive ease. Every attempt Seagal made to close the gap was met with a perfectly timed counterstrike. The power behind the kicks was immense, not raw brute force, but concentrated, honed energy that left no room for error. Seagal found himself off balance, struggling to react, his usual Aikido defenses unable to anticipate or absorb the relentless pressure. Each step forward was met with a punishing reply. His confidence began to waver under the storm of Bruce's kicks. Then, the final blow came, a swift, low side kick that struck Seagal's thigh with enough force to buckle his leg. Before he could recover, Bruce followed with a sweeping kick that caught Seagal's legs from under him, sending the towering figure crashing to the ground. The yard fell silent. Seagal lay motionless, bruised and humiliated. The shock of the sudden and overwhelming defeat left him unable to respond. No sound came from him, no protest or defiance. Bruce Lee, unruffled, took a few steps back, hands still behind his back, his expression unreadable. Without a word, without a glance, he walked away, leaving the scene with the quiet authority of someone who had made a point and needed no further explanation. Around them, Bruce's friends exchanged uneasy looks. They weren't sure if they had just witnessed a sparring match, a brutal warning, or something deeper. The energy in the yard was thick with disbelief. After several tense minutes, Seagal's friend finally called for help. The fight was over, but the consequences were just beginning. There are no photos, no corroborating witnesses beyond this single man's account. The story hangs in the air like a legend, part truth, part rumor. This encounter, if true, would have left a permanent mark on Seagal's psyche, shaping a deep-seated resentment and rivalry that shadowed his future career. But how much of this is fact and how much is myth? Seagal's side of the story. Fast forward to 2012, decades after the alleged incident. Steven Seagal sat down with renowned martial arts journalist Michael Schiavello for an in-depth interview. The setting was cordial, the tone reflective. When asked about Bruce Lee, Seagal's demeanor shifted to one of respect and nostalgia. He described Bruce as kind and approachable, someone who welcomed him into the martial arts community. Seagal recounted meeting Bruce through mutual friends, hinting at a bond formed over shared interests and family. In particular, Seagal mentioned an intimate detail. Bruce Lee had brought his young son, Brandon Lee, to gatherings where they joked about their children's uncanny resemblance, saying the kids looked like little Caucasian boys. This detail was meant to humanize the two men, to show their personal connection beyond martial arts legend. Yet, this narrative raised immediate questions among historians and fans. Brandon Lee was born in 1965. Steven Seagal's first known child didn't arrive until 1975, 10 years later. At the time Bruce was living and training in Culver City, Seagal would have been a teenager, with no children of his own. The timeline doesn't align. This inconsistency has led many to question the reliability of Seagal's memories or the accuracy of his account. Was it a case of genuine misremembering, or something more deliberate, a constructed narrative that bolstered Seagal's image in the martial arts world? The mystery deepens as we consider the lack of corroboration from anyone in Bruce Lee's inner circle. No recorded interviews, letters, or biographies mention Seagal's presence or any sparring challenge. No photographs or witnesses from Bruce's camps have emerged to support the story. So what exactly is Steven Seagal recalling in his version of events? And how much of the viral backyard showdown, legend, or outright fabrication? The timeline shatters. By the dawn of the 1970s, Bruce Lee was navigating a pivotal crossroads in both his personal life and burgeoning career. After years of intense physical training and film work, 1970 brought unexpected setbacks. That year, Bruce suffered a serious back injury during training, a debilitating event that limited his physical activities and forced him to adapt his approach to martial arts and filmmaking. Despite this, he was simultaneously gearing up for what would become his breakthrough film, The Big Boss, which was set to launch him from a niche martial artist into an international cinematic icon. At this juncture, Bruce was primarily based in Hong Kong, deeply involved with the local film industry, and also maintaining his home and martial arts school in the Los Angeles area, particularly in Culver City, California. His reputation as a martial arts innovator was steadily growing, but he was also extremely focused on refining his unique fighting philosophy, Jeet Kune Do, emphasizing fluidity and practicality over rigid styles. Meanwhile, the story surrounding Steven Seagal during this same period is less concrete and wrapped in ambiguity. Most reputable biographies state that Seagal graduated from high school earlier than average and relocated to Japan in 1971. It was in Japan that he began his earnest study of Aikido, an ancient Japanese martial art focused on blending with an opponent's movements rather than confronting force with force. Importantly, all accounts indicate that his formal Aikido training started only after his move to Japan. There is no credible evidence that Seagal practiced or even began training in Aikido while in California. Moreover, there is a conspicuous absence of any photographic proof, eyewitness testimony, or mentions in Bruce Lee's extensive biographies and documented history that support the claim that Bruce and Seagal ever met, let alone fought. The martial arts community of the era, including those closest to Bruce Lee, have never validated this alleged encounter. Yet, there is an intriguing, almost tantalizing detail that keeps the rumor alive: the geographical timeline. Bruce Lee was living and teaching in Culver City during the late 1960s and early 1970s, while Seagal was living in Fullerton, California, before moving to Japan. Though they lived in separate parts of Southern California, the time frames technically overlap in the early 70s. This slight intersection in place and time, however minor, is precisely the slender thread from which the legend has been woven and persistently clung to by fans and rumor mills. The Dan Inosanto Confusion. Adding another layer of complexity to this tangled narrative is the figure of Dan Inosanto, one of Bruce Lee's most trusted students and a respected martial artist in his own right. Inosanto was instrumental in spreading Bruce's legacy and was a skilled practitioner of Eskrima, a Filipino martial art involving stick fighting and empty-hand combat. A notable source of confusion comes from a scene in the 1991 action movie Out for Justice, where Steven Seagal's character has a brief, intense fight against a character played by Dan Inosanto. The fight is a showcase of martial arts styles, Aikido versus Eskrima, and while brief, it carries a symbolic clash of two worlds. In a later interview with Schiavello, Seagal refers to fighting a close friend of Bruce Lee's in a film. Observers have pointed to this as Seagal referring to Inosanto. However, the conversation soon shifts in the interview from Inosanto to Bruce Lee himself, and it is here that the waters become muddy and rumors begin to swirl. The crucial question becomes, did Seagal ever explicitly claim he fought Bruce Lee in real life? Or has this been a case of misinterpretation or deliberate distortion by content creators eager for sensational headlines? The evidence leans toward the latter. A careful and thorough review of the Schiavello interview reveals that Seagal never stated he had a physical fight with Bruce Lee. Instead, he spoke about mutual respect between martial artists, the indirect connection through James Coburn, a mutual acquaintance and mentor figure, and his admiration for Bruce Lee's fighting technique, especially highlighting Lee's legendary sidekick. Seagal acknowledged the impact Bruce Lee had on martial arts and cinema, but never made any claim about a direct confrontation or fight. This nuance has been lost in translation over time, replaced by viral clips and exaggerated commentary that transform vague remarks into concrete, but unfounded claims. Debunking the myth. When you start peeling back the layers of the story about a secret fight between Steven Seagal and Bruce Lee, the cracks appear almost immediately. The narrative, while captivating, doesn't hold up against the scrutiny of timelines or documented history. First, consider Seagal's martial arts journey. According to his own accounts and external records, he didn't seriously begin training in Aikido until the mid-1970s. This is a critical detail because Bruce Lee tragically passed away in 1973. The timeline simply doesn't align. Seagal couldn't have been a seasoned Aikido fighter capable of challenging Bruce Lee before Lee's death, because he wasn't even fully immersed in the discipline yet. In fact, the window for them to even cross paths professionally was incredibly narrow, if not non-existent. Then, there is the question of documented meetings or encounters. Despite decades of Bruce Lee's life being extensively chronicled, no credible evidence places Seagal in Lee's inner circles or in direct contact with him before 1973. Bruce's closest associates, people like Linda Lee, Bruce's wife, Dan Inosanto, one of his top students and closest friends, and Taki Kimura, another trusted disciple, have all remained completely silent on the matter. These were the people who lived with Lee, trained alongside him, and knew every important moment of his life intimately. If something as dramatic as a physical confrontation with Seagal had occurred, especially one violent enough to warrant an ambulance, it would have been impossible for them to stay quiet. Moreover, the timeline involving family adds more doubt. Brandon Lee, Bruce's son, was already a young child by the time Seagal had his first children. This dispels any notion that there was a mentor-student or familial-like connection that might explain a hidden fight or rivalry. It further isolates Seagal from Bruce's real-life timeline. Perhaps most telling is Bruce Lee's own nature. Known for his obsessive documentation, Bruce kept meticulous notes and was regularly interviewed about his training, philosophy, and experiences. A fight with a fellow martial artist, especially one that ended with Seagal's dramatic retreat or injury, would have been a story Bruce never forgot. Such an event would surely have appeared in his writings or been mentioned in interviews. Yet, there is no trace of this anywhere. When all these elements come together, no credible witnesses, conflicting timelines, absence from Bruce Lee's records, and silence from those closest to him. The story of this secret fight quickly unravels. It becomes clear that this legendary confrontation is almost certainly a fabrication, born of myth rather than fact. The real fight between Bruce Lee and Steven Seagal was not an actual physical encounter, but a long battle that only happened in the minds of fans and martial arts aficionados. However, this doesn't necessarily mean that these two legends never met or interacted, or that they influenced each other in ways the world never got to learn. The psychological fallout. Whether or not Steven Seagal ever crossed paths with Bruce Lee in a real fight, one thing remains indisputably clear. Bruce Lee has loomed large over Seagal's career and personal narrative. For decades, Seagal has circled around Lee's legacy, his name echoing in interviews and even moments of veiled critique. This fixation is not accidental. It reveals a complicated psychological landscape where admiration, rivalry, and unresolved tension intertwine. Even though Steven Seagal has never openly attacked Bruce Lee's legacy, a pattern of subtle contradictions has emerged over the years, hinting at something deeper. Not hatred, but unresolved rivalry. Seagal often positions himself as the only real martial artist in Hollywood. He dismissed Jean-Claude Van Damme, mocked Michael Jai White, laughed off Chuck Norris. And yet, these same figures, like Norris, trained directly with Bruce Lee and never questioned his skill. In fact, it's what Seagal doesn't say that speaks loudest. He's careful never to call Bruce Lee a fighter. He often draws a hard line between movie martial artists and real combat experience, always placing himself on the latter side. One comment, one offhand remark at a time, Seagal creates distance, as if he's trying and failing to outgrow a legend who died before he ever rose to fame. As if, for all his Aikido credentials, he still stands in Bruce Lee's shadow. Some say the resentment comes from envy. Others say it's ego. But those close to Bruce knew, if he had ever embarrassed someone in private combat, he would never brag about it. And if that someone had something to prove, they might spend the rest of their career denying it ever happened, while never quite letting it go. But beneath the surface, this ongoing engagement with Bruce Lee's image exposes a deeper struggle. The challenge of living in the shadow of a legend who redefined martial arts cinema and culture forever. Bruce Lee is more than a man to Seagal. He is an icon, a benchmark, and an unreachable standard. The comparisons are inevitable, and Seagal's efforts to assert his own identity often seem fueled by a need to reconcile that impossible legacy. The story of a fight between the two, whether imagined, exaggerated, or fabricated, functions as a psychological symbol. For Seagal, it could represent a fantasy of victory against an unbeatable opponent, a symbolic reclaiming of respect or validation. Alternatively, it might serve as an excuse, a narrative to justify frustrations, perceived slights, or the elusive acceptance that has dogged Seagal throughout his career. In either case, this story underscores the complex dynamics of rivalry and legacy in the world of martial arts. Do you believe Bruce Lee and Steven Seagal really fought that day in California? Or is this all just a myth spiraling out of control? Share your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for watching this video with us, and catch you in the next one.